Hey guys, this is Keith Schillen. I'm the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. I know you want to get to this interview that Riley contacted with John Makdessi. I just want to jump in real quick and just give a little warning. The very beginning of this interview, there was some technical issues, some internet issues, so it's a little choppy. It is a good interview. It's just a little hard to listen to the first 2 or 3 minutes. You can bear with it or just skip over it, but I think you'll like the interview. So I just want to throw that out there, give you guys a warning. All right, here's the interview.
Shootin' the Shit podcast here on the Loud. Back to you with our 7th episode. This week, another great guest from the UFC. He is a lightweight. He has been in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken, since 2011. I saw him debut when I was in college, which we'll show you how long ago that was. This week we have Canadian John Makdessi. John, how?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
It's here. It's sunny out, and it's Friday taping, so I'll be out of work. So get into the podcast. Just make sure you check out Loudmouth. They're good content. The Monday show I always forget the name of. Send on there, fight breakdowns, etc. Making sure I got out before he yells at me again for shows on the network. So have you here? Right before the kind of talking a little bit. You're taping this from your parents' house, family oriented from your culture. Obviously, you have a Lebanese who were actually born in Canada. So growing up in Canada, like I said, being a first generation
Lebanese. Canadian very mixed culture. A lot of different. You get a culture, so it's very pretty cool place to live. The nationality part.
And I know that Montreal, that's where you're at now, is pretty up there. So talking about the family values of the Lebanese, what kind of tradition, what kind of family bring from Lebanon that you're missing even as a Canadian citizen?
Man, so I'm very privileged. My parents came immigrated to Nova Scotia House, and I come from very close to my brother's sister. And family values, just very, very like stay together every Sunday. Whether very close to my mother, so something that from a young age.
You think, and now I don't even think this is much of like the Middle Eastern tradition. I think it's just a traditional culture. I mean, you sounds like you're just very Lebanese. Like a lot of I come from the Italian area of Chicago suburbs, and they're the same way. They get together, they have Sunday dinner, families there. Do you think that's just a traditional found, or do you think it's more towards the maybe I don't know, Lebanese-oriented cultures?
Honestly, I just think everybody's. I mean, it's not a race, it's not a nationality thing. It's just I think it's also personal preference. Everybody has their preference. You know what I mean? And it means even in the U.S., you guys, to U.S., a lot of immigrants came to Canada, to have a better life, to raise a family, because in their own country, it was very, a third world country is very hard to progress. Right. So it was the sacrifice, the values of when it's all about, they did a lot of sacrifice to have a better life.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it 100% does. And I think I used to be a social studies teacher, and I always talked about, because you're obviously in Canada, America, I always talked about, them all around the world coming and bringing the best things that they had of their cultures. And I think kind of to your point, your family brought the best of Lebanon, instilled it into you and your brothers and sisters. And then the same thing, I would assume. I mean, you're being a good example to your community. And we always talk about that melting pot. And I think, things that we were talking about, we're all different nationalities. We all have, I feel, and I think that's why we're all able to mesh better. When, I always tell my kids, when you had all these people from different, Irish and Italian and Polish and all these people and Germans just coming together, we're different in nationality, but they all had very similar values. And I think a lot of aspect, their religious backgrounds as well.
Honestly, it's a mixture of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, it's almost like a tree. Tree has a core, and then you have branches. But it's also, like I said, it's very important. It's a choice you make. It's a conscious. It's a very, like, for me personally, I can't speak. I always, it was hard for me when I'm in camp. When I knew that I had to save my career, when I knew that I hit a plateau staying in Montreal, when I was too comfort, I needed to branch out. I needed to expand my horizon. I needed to keep learning. So I had to start traveling, because certain things I wasn't happy staying at home in my career. You know what I mean? Sure. Like I wanted to go to Thailand. I wanted to travel just to challenge myself. So martial arts, the root of martial arts is personal development. has nothing to do with the actual fighting itself. But as an individual, you need to challenge yourself. And when you know that when you hit the comfort, you gotta go over and beyond. You gotta keep surpassing your comfort zone. So once I had to start traveling, it was very hard for me because I had to keep. I wasn't really close because in the beginning of my career, I started off from my home base was TriStar. My family was living in the same city, so my whole circle, my whole bubble was very close. My gym, my work, my family, my personal relationship. But when I had to get better and expand, that's when I had to burst. I had to burst my bubble, and I had to keep searching. And gotta start traveling now because I gotta, very fortunate. I went to Thailand. I worked in Milwaukee. I trained with under Duke Rufus, Anthony Pettis. My last camp, I was with Arizona with Ben Henderson. So I gotta better my skills. So I gotta travel.
Yeah, I think that's a smart thing to do, and I think a lot more fighters are starting to realize that as well. Now, you said that you had trained in Rufus Sport. That's almost in my backyard. What were your thoughts? You stayed in Milwaukee, I'd assume, when you were training there. What were your thoughts on Milwaukee as a city?
Oh man, it was tough. It's tough. It's good. It's good for fighting because it's very boring. You have nothing to do there. All you do is they drink beer, they go to a bar and they get into fights and they train. There's not much. There's not much. It's a blue collar city. You know what I mean?
That's about as accurate. That's about as accurate a description as Milwaukee as I think anyone's.
Man, I was in Milwaukee. I was like, what do you guys do here? We just drink and we just chill at a bar.
Yeah.
And I'm like that's pretty. You know what I mean? So there's not much to do than just train. So it was good for training. It really got me fired up. Duke is a very experienced guy. Duke has a lot of knowledge. His whole life he's around champions, and it makes more sense to me why the Pettis brothers they became a champion because they were under Duke since they were kids. You know what I mean? And having a coach like that is A1.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that he's one of the best coaches in MMA, hands down. Again, a striking legend. I mean, that's a guy you want to trade under, and I think that was a smart choice to go to Rufus Sport. Even though you're obviously a top-notch striker, there's nothing even if you're a top guy, there's something to learn from Duke Rufus. I think that's without saying. So now I know that you started martial arts at a young age. I believe you were in karate or Shootin. You can correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah.
But then I had read that when you'd gone off to high school, the gym that you trained at went away and you kind of, lost martial arts for a few years there. What did you do to fill the void when you lost doing martial arts in that time period?
Yeah, so I mean, I was very hyperactive as a kid, right? Always like moving around, giving, So I started martial arts at the age of 6. My older brother took me to the gym. Taekwondo was my first discipline. I had a lot of ups and downs, meaning my first sensei closed the gym down, so I had to kind of go back, scramble, find another gym. Because for me, it was always about connecting with the person. Like I had to connect with my teacher. It wasn't just like let me go to a gym and I don't give a shit about my teacher. For me, it was more important the connection. So to connect with an individual is very hard. So I was very fortunate. I connected with my first teacher. He closed the gym down. And then I met another high-level guy. He was a karate instructor. I met him. I connected with him. My first teacher, I won gold medal. I was competing every week on a weekly basis. I did very well in Taekwondo. Then I competed in karate, Shootin. And then he closed his gym down. And then I met another French instructor. He was a French Quebecois kickboxing guy. And then under him, I was undefeated. I was doing amateur fights locally, provincially, regionally. And then when he stopped teaching, that's when I got introduced to mixed martial arts. I was in college. And that's when somebody told me, go to TriStar. You'll like it there. And that's when I went to TriStar and I built my mixed martial art career.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one thing you said that really stuck with me there, I used to be a teacher before I moved on from that, is that making that connection with your teacher, or as a teacher, making that connection with your student can make all the difference in the world. If you don't respect your teacher, you don't respect your instructor, or he doesn't respect you, that mutual relationship is not going to work, and no one's going to get anything out of it, whether it's the teacher or the student. So I think you saying that is actually really, really important. Now, like I said, you had spent some time. Was there any other sports that you were involved in your life other than martial arts?
I mean, I cross trained for fun, for like a hobby. I did ice hockey for a while.
Oh, nice.
I played soccer. I played handball in elementary school. I started combining. I would combine like activities. I would cross train. I would do some bodybuilding. I started touching weights at 14, 15 years old. I would go to the boxing gym. I would go to the weight room. I would kind of like slowly, I would go to different gyms, learn different skill sets, and then I would put it together in TriStar. So personally, alone, I would go to a boxing gym. I'll go to a jiu-jitsu gym. I'll go to a wrestling club, and then I'll go to TriStar and mix it up all together. So I took myself to the gym. I did a lot of things on my own, where I had to be my own coach. As much as I want to connect to a teacher, like in mixed martial arts, it was very hard because there's so many people. There's like a wave of fighters. So you're one teacher and you have 50, 60 students. I don't expect them to focus on me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%, and that's that's the same thing with those large universities. You got one professor and 200 people in an assembly hall. But that's funny. You said you played hockey. I'm a hockey player myself. I mean, if you want, I know Muay Thai is great for clinch, but if you want to learn how to dirty box and fight in the clinch, nothing better than a hockey fight. I'll tell you that much. So the last thing I want to talk about before we get to the UFC Fight Night card that's coming up this Saturday is, and I talk about this with every fighter at every show until it goes away. You're training during the global pandemic, COVID-19. Again, we don't like to talk about politics and all this stuff, but we do like to talk about things that affect fighters. And obviously this affects fighters. I don't know how strict Canada's lockdowns were. I can tell you here in Illinois, Chicago, very strict stay-at-home orders. Gyms were all closed, which is hurts people like me who we don't play sports anymore, so we go to the gym. What was the lockdown like in Canada, and how did you train? Knowing that there were restrictions due to COVID-19.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, so where I'm living, Montreal, Quebec specifically, it got hit the biggest. So we're under quarantine. So here's the thing, right? The public doesn't know what happened. I was injured in my training camp. I tore my ACL, my meniscus, and I tore my MCL ligament. I continued training throughout that. I went to Brazil. My knee literally cracked, and it got worse in the fight. And I thought I won the fight. I know it was a close fight. If you looked at the numbers, I thought the decision was supposed to come to me. But again, like Dana White says, never leave it up to the judges.
Right.
It's not like in my career. It's not the first time. Not the first time that that the judges kind of gave it to the other guy. So I was undergoing quarantine, traveling. I tore my meniscus, tore my ACL. I had to move out of the house. I sold my old house, moved to another location. I had to do my surgery all through quarantine. So it was very stressful time for me.
Yeah, that sounds like it. House hunting during COVID, because I was doing the same thing. I bought a house during COVID. House hunting during COVID was an interesting time. I'll definitely tell you that much.
Big challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like your home gym, TriStar, I don't know, if you were there, but I mean, like, how did those guys handle it? Like, was the gym actually open? Did they defy orders, or everyone have to train at home on their own?
Yeah. So basically right now I'm kind of like independent. I'm a free agent. So I don't have so what I do is like I'm at a point in my career where I'm so developed that I just kind of connect to a gym and I negotiate with them. So I don't go to TriStar anymore.
Okay.
I don't train at TriStar any longer. I train my own. I have a gym. Right now I'm actually in the works with my brothers. I got two brothers, and we're in the works right now in my region where I'm living. We're gonna try to get a gym and try to assemble a solid boxing, CrossFit, and a mixed martial art fitness gym.
Oh, nice. Ever thought about, I know you're a businessman yourself. You ever thought about having your own promotion, regional promotion?
Well, right now in Quebec, honestly, I don't even want to get into that. There's so many rules and regulations, and the government here makes things very hard. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm more like, honestly, my passion right now that I've been doing on the side, that I've been experimenting, is like I want to mentor. I want to mentor guys, mentor people. Everything that I learned through my whole experience as a mixed martial artist, if it's self-defense, if it's nutritional, if it's mental toughness, I had great mentors. I was very lucky. I trained with Brian Kane. He was my peak performance coach. I got certified under him. He worked with George St. Pierre. He worked with NHL, NFL players. He worked the mental toughness aspect of things, the psychological aspect of sports. I worked with I had a good mentor, Ben Hoffman, for my nutrition. He mentored me through my whole career, how to, when I was cutting weight, dropping 155. Sometimes people are asking me, John, you should cut more weight to 145, because I mean, like on paper, I'm always the disadvantage.
Right.
I always have size disadvantage. If you look at most of my opponents, I'm always like the underdog. I have a reach disadvantage, home disadvantage because I'm traveling all the time.
Right.
I mean, every disadvantage possible a fighter can have. I've been through the shit, man. I fought Don Cerrone in 2 weeks' notice. I walked into one of his elbows. I fractured my jaw. I mean, being a fighter I tell people all the time, if you're not ready to die for it, don't sign up.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting stuff. I remember that. And before we get into the fights, I will say this: I don't remember much about the UFC in college. I covered the sport, but I don't know. It was a long time ago because it was like 2011, 2012. The one thing I do remember is, and this isn't me just sucking up. This is a legitimate memory. Is sitting in my room watching you fight Kyle Watson, and you hitting that spinning back fist. And I'm not joking. I spiked a cup of beer on the ground, like, because I was so surprised. I was in the middle of a drink like this, and you nailed spinning back fist. And I brought it down, and I spiked it on the ground. I had to clean it up, obviously. But that's one of the actual memories I have from covering the sport in college. So congratulations on making the highlight reel.
That's good. Thank you.
No problem.
That was one of my best performances for sure.
No doubt. Like I said, that's a memory I don't think I'll ever lose. So spin back fists are some of the most spectacular knockouts, and that's definitely one in my book. So take a look at this weekend card. Obviously, we're taping this a little early, but this will be on the UFC card for June 20th. It'll be taking place at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas. We'll just take a look at the main card. The first fight might interest you. It is a lightweight. Well, it's going to be a catchweight bout between lightweights. 160 pounds, you got a legend of the lightweight division, Jim Miller, taking on Roosevelt Roberts. Do you got any insight on these two fighters?
Actually, what's the other guy's? What's the opponent's name?
Roosevelt Roberts.
I never heard of him before. Is he a new guy?
He's been on. I think he's taken about 3 or 4 fights. I think he's one of the guys. I'm going to look it up while I'm talking here. He's one of those guys that was on the Contender Series, and I mean, he didn't have a lot of fights going into the Contender Series, and very much impressed. He's 4-1 in the UFC right now. He's got submission wins over Daryl Horcher and Brock Weaver, the guy that the UFC was trying to put a rocket ship on his back. His only loss comes to Vince Pichel. Obviously the other guy we have is Jim Miller. Everyone who watches MMA knows Jim Miller. What are your thoughts on Jim Miller at this point?
Yeah, I mean, Jim is a veteran. He has a lot of experience. So it's gonna be more or less of a grappling session. You know what I mean, those guys seem like two guys that are comfortable getting in close range, clinching, maybe a little bit of boxing. You know what I mean? So it might be, you never know. Jim Miller is he has experience, but also fighting, I tell people all the time, it's a mental. As much as it's physical, but it's also as much as mental. So what does that mean? From my own experience, stepping into Octagon, if that day you wake up and you don't feel, if the switch is not on, you're gonna have a bad night. You know what I mean? Like, it's all about the mental switch. If Jim Miller is on that night, either him or the other opponent, whoever mentally is on that night is gonna have that performance. That's gonna get that victory.
For sure, and Jim Miller is a guy that's tapped out Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts. I mean, he's just that legit on the ground. Roosevelt's a really good athlete. And here's the other thing no one talks about. Jim Miller is actually a pretty damn good boxer as well. He's, doesn't have a lot of kicks, but he has good hands and he has good movement on the feet. He's coming off a loss right now to Scott Holtzman. Before that, he choked out Clay Guida. I think it's a really close fight. I don't know if I'll give you my pick. I'm going to take Roosevelt Roberts in the upset. But I think it's going to be a really good fight, actually. Do you have a prediction on this one?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't like predicting guys. I don't like that. So I'll keep it. You choose, and I'll just keep it mutual.
Perfect. We'll both do a breakdown, and then I'll just give the predictions. Welterweight contest coming up next. If this isn't fight of the night, I don't know what will be. You got Lyman Good, who actually supposedly had COVID-19. So he's obviously fine. Taking on Bilal Muhammad, who, again, another guy who just goes in there and throws. Like I said, if this isn't fight of the night, I don't know what will be. This is two guys that just stand toe to toe and throw leather. What do you think about this fight?
Where is this gonna be? Which area is gonna be held the event?
This is going to be in Las Vegas.
In Vegas, so it's gonna be mutual territory.
Yep.
So I actually trained with Muhammad Bilal. He's from Chicago.
Yep.
He goes to Milwaukee. He trains with the Roofer Sports.
Mm-hmm.
He's very good. He's very durable. I sparred with him. So he's not. My way of fighting is I'm like a sniper.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very calculated. So I always had the better end of him when it was coming to the striking. But he's very durable. He's very stubborn. He's a good grappler. So if he's able to close the pocket, if he's able to close the distance, get into that clinch, maybe give him more of an output. Because in MMA judges, it's not like boxing, right? Boxing, they don't care about the output. They care about significant strikes. They care about who's more accurate, who's more in control. Versus MMA, it's just whoever looks like he's coming forward kind of wins the fight, regardless of they don't respect the defensive, right? They don't respect defense, right? So I will give it to Bilal if he's a hard-working guy. He has a good skill set. I'll give the edge to Bilal.
Yeah, Bilal is on a 2-fight win streak. Like you said, it's completely durable. The guy can take a punch. There's no doubt about that. He was knocked out by Vicente Luque, but there's been plenty of guys who have been. Good on the other end is on a 1-fight winning streak. The loss before that was to Damian Maia, which is explainable. Good's big. The big knock on Lyman Good is his counter wrestling and his grappling. It has gotten better. If Bilal, clinches and does go for takedowns, I think that's good, but I don't think he's going to. I think this is going to be a straight-up kickboxing match, and if somebody catches somebody, you could see a knockout. I think it's going to go to a decision. It's going to be a very bloody decision. I will take Bilal Muhammad myself, and honestly, a toss-up fight. I don't know how the odds makers are looking at this one right now, but this is going to be a good one. This is going to be one you do not want to miss 100%. Third fight of 5 on the main card, we go to the women's division. Raquel Pennington, who, rags to riches story, went from being a 500 fighter to a title challenger, taking on Marion Renault, who, if I'm not mistaken, is actually in her 40s, but she is still getting better somehow, even at that age. Any insight on either one of these fighters, John?
I'm not a big. Honestly, I don't know those female fighters, but I do. My thoughts when it comes to the women division, I feel like the females are very skilled. The skill set is very good. People underestimate their skill set. I feel like they're more aggressive than the male fighters.
Yep.
If you look at nature, you look at the animal kingdom. It's always the female animal who's more aggressive than the male. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So females always give exciting fights. I respect and I appreciate when I watch two females, fighting. So, but I don't know them in particular. I really can't predict. And also the age thing. Mixed martial arts is the only sport where, in other sports, when you hit your 30s and 40s, you kind of start thinking of retirement. But in mixed martial arts, when you look at Randy Couture, 35, 36 years old, became world champion. Mixed martial arts is a very tricky business. It's you're able to get away with certain things, where in other sports you can't get away with because they started in such a young age. An average mixed martial artist, their age starts between 19, 18 years old, 20 years old. So 40 years old for me, if she's, I believe in longevity. I believe in if you're a smart fighter, you're a smart athlete, you can fight longer.
Yeah, and Marion Renault is actually, I just looked it up, she is 42, and if I'm not mistaken, she's a gym teacher in, I believe in California. Taking a look at the records, Raquel Pennington is 1-3 in her last 4, but one of those fights was against Amanda Nunes for the title, and she went 5 rounds with Amanda Nunes before succumbing to a TKO. Marion Renault, again, she's a girl that Dana White kind of was disinterested in when it came to The Ultimate Fighter, and then she got a late minute opportunity, and she ended up winning that fight, and she's had her job ever since. 2-fight losing streak, but that doesn't mean much. I think Marion's a really good grappler. Raquel, a very good striker with good takedown defense. I think that takedown defense is going to hold here. I think Raquel Pennington takes this one, and she holds on to her top 5 spot. But kind of going to what you were saying, yeah, the women's fights, they're always a lot more aggressive. I agree 100% with that. And I think part of that is, and part of its nature, kind of like what you said, but I think there's not as many skilled, and this is coming from a guy who covers women's MMA for multiple websites. I don't think the women are nearly as skilled. They're probably just past the point that the UFC was when Royce Gracie was using BJJ to beat everybody. They're just past that. It's still like an infancy phase where they're just getting enough good fighters. I think because a lot of them aren't as well-rounded and aren't as skilled, that's why their fights are more exciting, because they just go in there, bite down on their mouthpiece, and hope for the best. And that's not a problem. That's why they're entertaining fights. There's obviously, really, really skilled fighters like Amanda Nunes, like your Holly Holmes, like your Valentina Shevchenkos, But, when you get past maybe the top 3 or 4 in the division, it really gets kind of sketchy, I guess you would say, in terms of skill level. But again, sometimes MMA isn't about being the most skilled. It's a performance. It's about putting on exciting fights. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. That might actually challenge for fight of the night because both of those fighters also bring it. Co-main events. These guys aren't in your weight class, but in theory they could fight up. We got featherweights. We got Josh Emmett of Team Alpha Male taking on Shane Burgos, who is a guy that has really put his stock up in recent times. Do you got any insight on this one, John?
I never heard of those fighters, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
2 guys in a co-main event, huh?
Yeah, honestly, UFC is playing every week. It's great. There's over 600 fighters in the roster. For me to keep, it's very hard to keep up to. It's not really my job to focus on other fighters. You know what I mean? So, but I never heard of those guys.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that you're gonna tell me who they are.
Sure. So Josh Emmett's a Team Alpha Male guy. Really good wrestling, physically big. He's a guy that I can't even believe makes featherweight. He's a very, very thick featherweight. In terms of record, he's 6-2 on the UFC roster. His only losses were a really questionable decision, and then Jeremy Stevens, destroyed him. But that's because Jeremy Stevens tends to do that to people. 2-fight win streak. He knocked out Michael Johnson, scored a TKO over Mirsad Bektic, which those are 2 big wins for him. Like I said, he's a wrestler, but he's got a lot of power in his hands, and he tends to use them very well. On the other end, you got Burgos, who's mostly a striker. He's on a 3-fight win streak himself, including wins over Cub Swanson and Makwan Amirkhani, who was his most recent one, who he knocked out. Basically, you have a striker versus wrestler matchup, with the wrestler also really, really enjoying to throw hands. Now that you know their backgrounds, do you have any insight into this wrestler with powerful hands versus a very slick striker matchup?
So here's my thing. Here's the question. You have Alpha Male, and what's the other guy's camp? Who's his coach?
I think he's with Team Sityodon. Team Tiger Schulman.
I never heard of those guys. I never heard that camp.
They're in New York. They have a lot of really good fighters, actually. Jimmy Rivera, Louis Gaudino. They actually Uriah Hall. If you know Uriah Hall.
Yeah.
He's trained from Tiger Schulman. He's a really good striking coach.
Yeah, well, you know what? I always like to look at the coaches. I always like to look at the corner and the camps because it plays a big factor to the fighter's performance on fight night. I know Alpha Male it became very saturated. Alpha Male is a lot of guys going in there. Just like TriStar. TriStar was a small, closed circuit gym. Then once they opened up doors internationally, every fighter started to flock in, and that's when you see the quality fades away. In every corporation, once there's too much people coming in, and then it becomes watered down.
Right,
the quality,
100%.
I'm trying to say. So it's going to be a good fight, both sides to the spectrum. I'm going to give it more to the edge, to the gym, to the camp from Uriah Hall.
Tiger Schulman. Yeah, and here's the thing. That's one of the most underrated camps in MMA. That guy is a fucking great striking coach, and he has produced some really good. He's produced title contenders. Jimmy Rivera on the shelf for a while, but he's a guy at bantamweight. He's top 10, and if it wasn't for the long layoff and a couple tough losses to top 7 guys, he's there. And Uriah Hall is a human highlight reel. A very good camp, but as you said, Alpha Male. Josh Emmett's probably one of the top guys in Team Alpha Male right now. you got the big guys like, obviously Uriah is the name that you think of. They have guys like Cody Garbrandt who finally came back and had a big win. Did you see that knockout that he had the other day?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was a good fight.
That was, I think right now that's the knockout of the year. I don't know what you think, but
Well, anything can happen. That's why fighting. That's why mixed martial arts is I always say it's the most underrated sport in the sense of
100%.
it's the closest to a street fight.
Oh yeah, yeah. 100%. It's actual fighting. I love watching boxing and kickboxing, but let's be honest, MMA is real fighting. That is kickboxing and boxing. So it's just how it is. Let's get to the main event, and then I can get you out of here. I'm sure you got shit to do today. We got heavyweights. A guy from my neck of the woods who actually went to college maybe 10 minutes from my house. Curtis Blades, who is a tough dude, taking on a Russian kickboxer, Alexander Volkov. What do you think about these two guys?
Yeah, the heavyweight is gonna be. It's always the heavyweights. I'm very impressed with the heavyweights because people they look at their sizes, but you put technique, now you put power, and you put mass. The equation for that is gonna be fireworks. You know what I mean? Like big guys, they can generate good technique. They know they're not just swinging for the fences. So once you're able to combine perfect technique with your size, and now you're able to generate, you're learning how to generate all the force. It's very beautiful to watch, especially the heavyweights, because they have it's all about, because that any punch, any kick is going to be a knockout.
Oh yeah, 100%. And well, in this fight, you got a guy that loves to grapple versus a guy who loves to strike. And here's the thing I've always said: if it wasn't for the NFL, I feel like the UFC would have a stacked heavyweight division, because all those guys that would be playing NFL football would be doing MMA, and then you'd have because everyone in the NFL is over 205 pounds, and they're big guys. Blades is an accomplished amateur wrestler. Volkov is a former Bellator champion, if I'm not mistaken, and a guy with a lot of kickboxing credentials. His takedown defense is going to have to be on his P's and Q's. Looking at Curtis Blades' record, he's a guy that beat the hell out of Alistair Overeem. He's a guy that beat the hell out of Junior Dos Santos. This is not a guy that plays around. I think he's got one loss in the UFC, maybe two. Oh, he's got two, and they're both to Francis Ngannou. So that'll tell you everything you need to know. And one of them was his late notice debut. So I'm going to take Curtis Blades in this. I think he takes down Alexander Volkov, who is in no way a bad fighter. He's a top 10 UFC heavyweight. But yeah, I just think his wrestling and his athleticism is going to be too much for Volkov.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean that's just how it is. He's a Chicago boy as well, so I might be biased because I'm a Chicago guy too. So in the same way that you might take a Montreal or a Halifax fighter, but we'll see.
It's only normal. You have to support on your side of things.
Right. I always go for the Polish fighters because of my background. I was like, oh yeah, that Polish guy's gonna kick his ass, even if I don't know who he is. So it's just
that's all good, man. It's human nature.
That's 100%. Well, John, we really thank you for coming on the show today. Awesome insights. A lot of stuff. Honestly, when I was getting this interview prepared, I wasn't really sure what to talk about, but you talked about a lot of really interesting stuff in terms of training and how to get yourself up tip-top shape on fighting. So really, really appreciate the insight. Do you have anything you'd like to plug? Where can we find you? Use this time now to kind of just tell us maybe your sponsors and where we can find you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. I love, I always love to share my knowledge. Anybody that wants to keep up to date, just on my social media at John Makdessi, and I'm always going to appreciate all my loyal fans and everyone that keeps supporting me throughout my mixed martial art career. Just a big shout out to all my fans, and especially to guys like you, helping the fighters. Giving a fighters voices.
Absolutely. Did you have anybody else you want to shout out?
No, man, everything is pretty good. There is no sponsors anymore. Reebok got all the sponsors. So
that's true.
Shout out to Reebok. Shout out to Reebok and the UFC for hooking me up with giving me an opportunity to keep fighting.
Perfect. Well, John, honestly, awesome interview. Really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to plug myself before I let you go. Make sure you check out the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. We got shows every day on there, especially with these lockdowns and stuff. I know they're starting to ease the lockdowns. Everybody is craving for content. If you're looking for good MMA content, head there. We got great shows from guys like Keith Showin. We got the show that I'm on with Kyle Steele and Patrick Auger and Sean Ihaz, who, if I forgot his name, he'd be pissed at me next week. Also, head to the sites that I write for, Combat Press. I do the women's rankings every month. Check those out. Go to MMAintel.blog. I know it's a .blog, but I'm too cheap to buy the .com. All right, we got lots of scouting reports. We got rankings. We got everything there. Predictions for the UFC. We got everything there. All right, so check that out too. And then keep checking in on our YouTube channel here. We got interviews once a week with UFC fighters, Invicta fighters, Bellator fighters. We got them all. We're hoping to have Jake Shields next week if that works out. So check that interview out. That should be more than interesting. So again, John, thank you very much. In conclusion here, hopefully you guys enjoy the fights this week. It looks like a very good card. So keep watching fights, keep listening to Shootin' the Shit, and go fuck yourselves. Have a great night.
See you.